there's ever a client that actually achieved the synergies that it thought it was getting in an acquisition, I'd be surprised to. I'd shake their hand, because they're harder than they're harder to achieve than you think, because synergies means firing people, it means closing facilities, it means shutting down distribution networks. I'm sure they've done it. I mean, we have a successful internal rate of return acquirer, serial acquirer here, so I'm sure it's happened. But for the most part, particularly as the acquisitions get really big, if the only thing that's justifying the acquisition is synergy savings, it's a bad acquisition typically. That's my experience.
The other part of it is that some of these questions and discussions need to take place up front, because it will affect the way the evaluation is done, the way the financial models are put together to justify, you know, all the things that the decision maker is going to be discussing. So it's part of your assumption base is, what do you plan on doing? How are you going to integrate? Is it going to be standalone? There are certainly many legal questions. There are certain tax questions. I mean, you don't want to find out, gee, we're going to fold this into the main company, and now we have exposure in 26 states. We were only doing business in 12. Well, guess what? You know, now you have potential exposure on different tax liabilities with the parent company, if you will, that brought in the acquisition. So there's a lot of different scenarios have to go through, but I think all of these issues have to be discussed up front in terms of the assumption base and the potential plans built into your evaluation when you discuss an acquisition candidate.
All of our acquisitions have been consolidations, and so the synergies we're looking for are almost entirely internal, and they're operational in nature, primarily in manufacturing, with a big emphasis on indirect employees. It's also in SG&A, and then, as I had said earlier, from an external standpoint, we're looking at consolidation on the distribution and sales side as well, and that's given us some synergies that have worked to our advantage.
Having done a significant integration of two college textbook publishing companies and given 6 months to complete the integration, I mean, the biggest challenge is having both sides understand it, and you've got to start before the closing so that everybody understands it, and then it's working because at the end of the day, people are going to be let go, and it's you can say, you know, my own people, if I'm doing the acquisition, well, I'm safe, but the reality is, at the end of the day, if there's someone who's better in the seller's organization, then you're going to bring them in. And it's a matter of saying, okay, how can we work together? How do we integrate the systems? You know, my warehouse system used this software, yours uses another one. Well, what are we going to do? Because at the end of the day, you want to have everybody on the same page. One billing system, one order processing system. And that's the challenge, because it's easy to say, oh, well, we're just going to go, you know, SAP. Well, if you were using Lawson or somebody else, and now you've got to change the mentality of the programming staff, it's very difficult. But I think you have to form the integration teams right on day one, be totally open about it, and share with everybody what's happening and how we're doing on the integration. Because, you know, at the end of the day, you're going to be successful because the people were willing to take the time to make the change. It's all about change management. If people aren't willing to change, you're never going to succeed. You have to be very clear up front, what's the purpose for the acquisition? I mean, if you're a strategic consulting company and you're now buying an operational consulting company, what you're basically saying is the two of us can now work better together. If I've got an opportunity for assignment and I'm an operational consulting company, but guess what, the client wants strategic too? You know, that's where I can add the value. The small boutique consulting firms are challenged by the big consulting firms because they offer everything, but in many cases it's the small independent consulting companies that can, you know, do the job at a better cost and more efficient and at a better, you know, solution.
It's very, very difficult to find a pure play, if you will. You have certain companies, and finding a publicly traded comparable that mirrors your revenue mix, product mix, is next to impossible. So everything you use have a lot of noise in it, so it's really a imprecise proxy as to what your company is trading for. And at the same time, public companies tend to be much bigger than privately held companies, and there's a lot of academic research around why smaller companies trade at a lower multiple due to discount for minority and marketability discount. So they're important in a sense, is that when we are helping a company to either buy or sell, is to use that as a metric to say, guide, if you will, provide some guidance around valuation. But the real there's no substitute to actually knowing transaction that has happened in that industry and knowing what the multiples are. Those are probably the best data points.